Everyone, and welcome straight into today's Explainer. I am so glad you're here because we are unpacking something that is incredibly relevant right now. We're looking at a massive, fundamental shift happening in how we learn, how we teach, and honestly, how we prep ourselves for a world that's becoming absolutely dominated by artificial intelligence. At the very heart of this shift is a concept called Education 5.0. It's a complete paradigm change, and it's entirely focused on keeping humanity right at the center of an automated world.
I want you to think about this question for a second, because it hits pretty hard, doesn't it? Are our schools actually preparing us for the future, or are they just training us to compete with machines? There is a lot of completely valid anxiety right now surrounding Industry 4.0. With algorithms and AI suddenly doing things we literally used to think only humans could do, there's this very real fear that we're being trained for a race against machines. And spoiler alert, that is a race we will inevitably lose if all we care about is automation and basic digital skills.
Okay, so to figure out where we need to go, we kind of need to look at how we got here. We obviously started with Education 1.0, that classic teacher-centric era of oral and written transmission, basically the traditional lecture. Then the internet exploded onto the scene, bringing us Education 2.0 and 3.0, where web tools and social sharing just took off. Next up was Education 4.0, which was all about syncing learning with Industry 4.0, heavy focus on digitalization, automation, coding, you name it. But in this massive rush to digitize everything, our learning environments got incredibly efficient, but also, well, maybe a little too robotic. We definitely lost some of that essential human element along the way.
And that is exactly where Education 5.0 steps in to save the day. It is the ultimate pivot. It's a paradigm that aggressively reorients our focus back to the human dimension of learning. It prioritizes things like values, ethics, emotional well-being, creativity, and this is absolutely crucial, human-machine collaboration. So instead of trying to compete with the machine, Education 5.0 aligns with the fifth industrial revolution to create this amazing synergy between human intelligence and artificial intelligence.
Joseph Aoun really hit the nail on the head back in his 2017 work when he argued that we need a robot-proof education. Just let that sink in for a moment. Robot-proof. Unless you want to try out calculating a supercomputer, which, I highly recommend against, we absolutely have to cultivate uniquely human capacities that machines can't easily replicate. I mean, if a computer can process data a million times faster than you shouldn't be competing on processing power. You should be competing on creativity, mental flexibility, and entrepreneurship. Education 5.0 is literally all about doubling down on the exact traits that AI completely lacks.
Now, what's genuinely fascinating here is that Education 5.0 actually carries a dual meaning, and we should look at this objectively to get the whole picture. Globally, like we just talked about, it's this techno-pedagogical view perfectly aligned with Industry 5.0. But in the African context, and specifically the Zimbabwean context, which was introduced around 2019 by their Ministry of Higher and Tertiary Education, the term has a very specific policy meaning. It takes the traditional university missions, teaching, research, and community service, and tacks on two more: innovation and industrialization. So in that context, it's an institutional framework aimed directly at driving national development through those 5 pillars.
But whether you are looking at the global techno-pedagogical framework or those regional policy doctrines, they both ultimately share the exact same goal: holistic development. It goes way beyond just rote academic skills to really foreground the 4 C's: critical thinking, creativity, problem-solving, and collaboration. You'll often hear these called 21st century skills, and they are essential higher-order capabilities. It's really about developing emotional intelligence and resilience, making sure learners are well-rounded humans who can navigate a super complex, constantly shifting world.
Right, so how do we actually pull this off in the real world? Enter the Education 5.0 toolkit. Notice the incredibly important framing here: technology as an enabler, not a replacement. Under Education 5.0, technology is strictly a tool for support human educators and human learners. We are not trying to replace the teacher with a glowing screen. Instead, we're essentially giving the teacher superpowers so they can focus on what actually matters: human-centric, highly personalized mentoring.
At the very center of that toolkit is, of course, artificial intelligence. Researchers like Luckin and her colleagues noted in their report Intelligence Unleashed that AI is just incredibly powerful for adaptive learning and intelligent tutoring. It can tailor content to your exact pace, your specific needs, and provide real-time feedback. By doing the heavy lifting of, say, grading and basic tutoring, AI frees up teachers for high-value human interaction. But we also have to acknowledge the elephant in the room: the rise of generative AI, like large language models. It's a huge double-edged sword, bringing massive possibilities for content creation, but also some really intense concerns about academic integrity and just over-relying on the machine.
Moving beyond AI, immersive tech like virtual and augmented reality is totally reshaping the classroom. VR and AR create simulated environments for experiential learning. Just picture virtual laboratories, medical simulations, or literally walking through a historical reconstruction that would otherwise be unsafe or just physically impossible to visit. But researchers like Radianti throw in a very necessary caution here. Just slapping a VR headset on a student doesn't magically guarantee they're learning anything. The pedagogical design, the actual human-created lesson plan driving the tech, is what determines if it's truly effective.
Okay, when I say blockchain, your brain probably jumps straight to cryptocurrency, right? But its real superpower in education is the secure, tamper-resistant storage of academic credentials. This is a brilliant concept highlighted by researchers Gretsch and Camilleri. Imagine having a self-sovereign, completely portable digital wallet of your degrees and micro-credentials that nobody can tamper with and nobody can take away from you. This drastically cuts down on fraud and gives you complete, permanent ownership over your own educational record. A real game changer for sure.
Rounding out this tech ecosystem, we've got the powerhouse trio of IoT, big data, and cloud computing. The Internet of Things uses connected sensors to create smart classrooms. Imagine a classroom that actually knows when you're starting to doze off and suddenly adjusts the lighting or the temperature. Pretty wild, right? Well, all those connected devices generate massive amounts of big data. Foundational author George Siemens pointed out way back in 2013 that this data feeds learning analytics, helping educators spot learning patterns, and even predict which students might be at risk of falling behind before they actually do. And finally, cloud computing is that invisible glue holding the whole shebang together, allowing scalable, anytime, anywhere access to all these resources.
Now, having all this shiny tech is great, but actually pulling off Education 5.0 requires some serious heavy lifting across 4 specific pillars. First up, pedagogical requirements. We have to shift to learner-centered, outcomes-based approaches. Second, infrastructural requirements. You absolutely need a robust digital backbone. I mean, the tech just doesn't work without internet and device access. Third, human resource requirements. We have to actually train our educators to use these tools comfortably. And fourth, ethical and governance requirements, protecting data privacy and ensuring absolute transparency in how algorithms make decisions about students.
Let's look closer at that human resource shift, because it changes the very definition of what a teacher is. We are moving far away from the sage on the stage, the sole source of knowledge, just delivering a one-way monologue lecture, to the guide on the side, a mentor who facilitates learning experiences. Educator Peter Fisk notes that this moves us toward highly personalized, project-based learning. But to pull this off, educators need continuous training in what's known as TPACK. That stands for Technological Pedagogical Content Knowledge. Basically, they have to deeply understand how the technology, the teaching method, and the actual subject matter all overlap seamlessly.
So, everything we've talked about sounds incredible, right? A personalized, highly effective, totally human-centric utopia. But it is time for a reality check. Can technology alone actually fix education? If we aren't extremely careful, the exact tools that are meant to enhance education could end up breaking it even further.
The harsh reality is that rushing to digitize without careful governance brings massive systemic risks. It could completely erode the relational core of education. We face huge data privacy and surveillance risks. If an ecosystem tracks literally every click a student makes, who actually owns that data? Then there's the risk of de-skilling. If AI writes all our essays for us, do we eventually forget how to think critically? And crucially, there are massive infrastructure gaps, particularly in the Global South, which leads us directly to our next major hurdle.
The digital divide is a persistent, structural obstacle. It's the elephant in the room. According to the International Telecommunication Union's 2021 findings, basic internet connectivity and device access remain massive, glaring barriers in developing contexts. Think about it. If Education 5.0 relies heavily on cloud computing, VR, and AI, but half the world doesn't even have reliable Wi-Fi or a modern tablet, then Education 5.0 isn't an equalizer. It actually becomes an accelerator for even deeper global inequality.
And that brings us to a really vital warning concept: techno-solutionism. This is the dangerous, naive assumption that just throwing technology at a complex human or educational problem will magically fix it. Researchers like Holmes and his colleagues stress that we have to advocate for strong ethical AI frameworks. We must safeguard human values above all else. Technology is just a medium, guys. It requires good pedagogy, willing human facilitators, and equitable access to actually create any sort of meaningful learning.
Which leaves us with this final provocative thought to chew on today. As machines get smarter and smarter, is your education making you more like a computer or more fundamentally human? Education 5.0 tells us that our absolute greatest asset in the future won't be our ability to process data, but our ability to be uniquely human, to be creative, empathetic, and relentlessly adaptable. I challenge you to look at your own learning journey with that exact thought in mind. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the Explainer, and remember, keep asking the big questions.